Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 106 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome back to the show. In this episode, we're going to dive into the heart of an accurate rifle. This is going to be a chapter in our upcoming book, The Extraordinary Guide to Accuracy. This is going to be a multi-part series here on the podcast, and really about 20 years in the making of all the things that really matter and just breaking the rifle down into all the little parts and pieces and really where the heart of it all starts. So really excited for this podcast. It's going to be a great multi-part series. I really hope you enjoy it. So thank you for tuning in. Welcome to the show. And without further ado, here we go. Before we get started, I would like to say a quick thanks to two of our sponsors, TriggerTech. TriggerTech is a proud sponsor of the show and maker of fine triggers. We use them here in all of our custom rifles. The TriggerTech Special is by far my favorite, but they do also make the perfect hunting trigger, the TriggerTech Primary, as well as some of the best match triggers on the planet, and they make them for our rifles as well as many other brands. So if you need a great trigger in your rifle, or if you'd like one, stop over to triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com today. Also, MDT, maker of great chassis. We use them here on many of our custom builds, and as we talked in previous podcast, a lot of great hunting chassis coming on the market, including the HNT 26, and they've got some really exciting new tactical chassis coming out this year, next year as well. So if you want to upgrade your existing rifle and you like it to shoot a little bit better or just a little bit more adjustable, stop over to mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com today. So to give some history on where Wolf Precision came from and my journey into custom rifle building, I think it really starts back with, where everybody starts in any type of industry is, they're passionate about it. They've got, these dreams and aspirations as an artist, as a guitar player, as a, someone building architecturally awesome houses and, all these things that we get passionate about. Fishing, for example, hunting, flying aircraft, a lot of hobby-based, industries where people just, it's their passion. It's the one thing that's sort of like the love of their life besides, of course, you got, God upstairs and family and friends and all the other things that should take priority, but we're talking about passions and hobbies, right? And when I was young, I really loved to shoot. I'm talking like maybe even pre-teen years where we'd take 22 rifles out and we'd shoot all the little sparrows or all the little things that were just nuisance birds in our areas. And, granted, it's a different time back in the 70s and 80s where, in rural America, you could do this type of stuff and it wasn't frowned upon. And I'm not promoting for kids to go out and start shooting birds all over the place. But you go into any air gun YouTube search and you'll see people air gunning small birds still to this day. And, for a young kid back then, shooting that and shooting woodchucks and varmints, it turned into just an escape. I was no different than any other kid. I just loved to shoot. And I wouldn't have been more excited. In my mind, it could have been a big game African game hunt, or it could have been, stalking dangerous prey through the savannas. And these are where children's minds go. And it's exciting, right? It's new. You're new to all of this, and it's just you and your gun, So fast forward from, the preteen years through the teen years. And then, of course, getting into more hunting. Harvesting squirrels was one of my favorite things to hunt when I was a kid. A, because they were really good to eat, and B, they were challenging. You take a 22 long rifle out and set in the woods for a couple hours, and shoot a couple squirrels. And I would cook and clean them myself. And then you get into varmint hunting in general. Varmint hunting is something that a lot of people really get into because they love to shoot. But then also, you're doing a good deed. You're sort of controlling the varmints, not really decimating them all like some people think, but it really, when I got into the varmint hunting part, then accuracy became, because the distance were getting farther. I remember shooting 22 mags at 100, 200. I remember shooting 22 rimfires, practicing at 100 and probably much further beyond on targets. And of course, back then we didn't have rangefinders, but we were able to walk those rounds in there, even with open sights, which was pretty crazy for thinking about the quality of the ammunition that we were shooting and the quality of the rifles. We're talking about $99 .22 long rifles. Then you get into, I guess I got bit by the long range bug, like most of us do. And it became an obsession is, how do you will a bullet to go to 1,000 yards and actually hit what you're aiming at? And to me, there's both an art to it, a science, and even something a little mystical or magical about it. There's that whole cloud over it of just how it works and how magical it is when everything comes together and you're actually hitting what you're aiming at. So this last class was a perfect example. We finished up a long-range shooting school, and on day 2, we shoot our long stuff, and we have some gallon water jugs with different food coloring in them at 900 and 1,000. And, of course, everybody knows the size of a gallon water jug. And I put them up there because I'm a varmint hunter. And when you hit them, they blow up. It's pretty fun. And, guys get pretty excited about it. And when they go home, they're not saying, well, I shot a piece of steel at 1,000 yards. In everybody's mind, they could think, 2-foot piece or 6-foot piece. But when they tell them, hey, I shot a gallon water jug at 1,000 yards, everybody knows the size of that. And what was really cool is this class was we had customers from Arizona, we had customers from Texas and some surrounding states that came in, and we really appreciate the effort that they took to come here, but none of them shot beyond 300 yards. Most really anything beyond 100 for real. And at the end of day 2, they all hit gallon water jugs at 900 and 1,000 yards. And a couple of them on first round hits and second round hits. So they hit one and they worked their way over and hit another one. And that's skill set. And you could hear them leaving like how they're just absolutely stunned how it works. And they've got that mystical or magical thing like that, oh my God, that was awesome. There's a lot that goes on to it, but the fact that that bullet went where they wanted it to go, when it could have went anywhere else, on the planet, and they helped make that happen. There's something with that, right? And they were stunned, like all of them at dinner that night, that they were talking to me the next day about the conversations that they had, and they're just absolutely floored that, here's 4 guys that have never done this before, and by the end of day 2, they're shooting stuff out to 1,000 yards like they've been doing it their whole lives. And we use 22 Creeds, of course, and we use custom rifles. We all of them here were either shooting a school rifle or one that we had built for them. And the gentleman who brought his own rifle was shooting a 22 Creed that he built with us. And I don't want to downplay. I always tell guys, start with what you have when you get into long-range shooting. And we've all done it. Like, I've shot Savages, and I don't hang my hat on an emblem on anything. It's not who I am. So start in the long-range shooting and what you have. If it's a Ruger Precision rifle, it's a Savage. I mean, that's where we all start. And then keep working up through. And I always tell people in the class here that just go out and enjoy the art. Get hooked into it. Spend your time and effort on ammunition and just learning and practicing and enjoying it. Don't put stress on yourself to go out and buy the best equipment that you can buy right out of the gate. I mean, unless you have the extra funds to do it, then that's great. But it's not 100% necessary to get started, right? But now, let's talk about a couple more things to get involved in this. When I got into long-range shooting, there were lots of years that were frustrating as far as spending tons of time doing reload development and not getting the results, wasting hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars on trying different powders, trying different coatings in the barrels, trying different bullets, coating barrels, bedding actions, cutting crowns, all these things with factory guns that I could do with an end goal to get that consistent result was really hard. And that led me to where we're at today. And it's like, I got on this obsession as to, okay, what makes a rifle great? And what are the keys? Like, there's got to be something to a rifle that's the pivot point that takes them from good to great. There's got to be something in the process. There's got to be, a priority in the parts and pieces as to the most important to the least important. And I started going through all of that piece by piece, and in some cases modifying, in some cases fixing, in some cases outright re-engineering, designing, and patenting different things to solve and fix a lot of these problems, not for any business reason, really. Not that I was like, well, hey, I'm going to reinvent the wheel and sell it as a reinvented wheel. That's not it at all. There was a very selfish reason that it was a personal thing here, not a commercial thing. I wasn't looking to be honest, I'm absolutely floored to see that, we're in business, and here I am 20 years later with a growing and business. And I have been blessed, I have to say, in life that so many opportunities have come from just working hard and doing the right thing. And we've always stayed true to our values. We've always stayed true to, doing the right thing, honesty and integrity. That's not words to me. That's how we live our life. And testament to my daughter, when my wife went out to dinner, and she's graduating college this year, and it just made me melt inside that they were having dinner. And she had said to my wife, she said, Dad should probably run for borough council because, of all the people that I've ever met, honesty and integrity and all of these values that he holds dear, that he lives by, would be a great asset to the borough here. And to have my daughter telling my wife that moved me a little bit, that, that she sees it, that she knows that we're not posers, or that we just do the right thing when people are looking, that this is true core values to our life. So when we invented the ACE and did all of these other things to rifles, it wasn't about reinventing the wheel and becoming overnight successes, and we were going to be famous, all that stuff. Nothing we've ever done has been for that. Me breaking down the rifles, my journey began as a very selfish reason. I was just trying to eliminate all the hassles that I had gone through in trying to make the perfect rifle, and trying to prioritize what was important, sitting down and researching an action, getting with the experts in all of the fields that I could get access to say, okay, you are the very best at chambering a rifle. You are the very best at machining that I have ever met. You are the very best. And I've been very blessed that these people would actually sit down and talk and train and discuss these things with me and work through these problems as both intelligent shooters and being the best in the class of what they do. So the next series of podcasts that we're going to come out here and talk about is just a process that going through, and how do you make the perfect rifle out of imperfect parts? And here's the problem is that, everything that we do as humans, whether we build it, fix it, they're not always perfect. And when you talk about custom rifles versus factory rifles, you can have a custom-built house that's built worse than any modular home ever built on the planet, right? Or just because it's custom doesn't mean it's good. You're still at the mercy of the engineers. Do they know what they're doing? Stresses and loads. Are they cheaping out materials? You're then still at the mercy of the people who purchase the materials. Are they buying the right quality? Are they skimping in corners? Then you've got the people who are delivering the parts, handling them properly. And then you got the people, foremen, that are running the job site to make sure that all the proper procedures are being followed and that nothing's being shortcutted. Then you've got the workers themselves. Are they following code? Are they building things properly? Are they passionate about really building their house right? And all of these things have to be right in order for the house to be right. You're vulnerable to the weakest link in the system. You can have world-class engineers and world-class builders, but if you got a foreman that's taking shortcuts, telling them, don't do that job, we'll skip this part, it's not important, we're only going to use half the materials here, even though he's directing world-class builders or workers, you still wind up with the same problem. And rifles are the same way. In major manufacturing, what I often find amazing is how they're able to balance that good enough to pass as far as the product going to the customer and not being absolutely awful, but then still driving the price down too and making it affordable. And I sit back with amazement sometimes to think that you can buy a $600 rifle. But that does come with problems and some potential big problems. And it does mean that your odds of coming out with a great rifle are lower, or a good rifle, probably decent odds. And then you still have decent odds of getting one that's probably not going to shoot well and cause all kinds of heartache. And what I learned right out of the gate was if the rifle just seemed to be super picky, couldn't find loads for it right out of the gate, was random fires, all these things, there was probably some more serious issues collectively than I had the wherewithal to deal with. And I would just get rid of it. And I would go out and buy another one and work with that one. And my rule with factory rifles was it had to be a good shooter first before I'd even start working with it. And so I had a certain expectation of, okay, right out of the gate, here's what I expect from the rifle. And if it meets this, then I think it's a rifle worth spending time with. And then I'll start working with it, reloading for it, doing all these little accurizing things, trying to make it a great shooter. Because I've got the core. I know the core is solid. I know it's a solid rifle. So in the years of going through all of this, leading into eventually what was custom rifles, I've prioritized and sort of made a list of what was important in order of number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and really have been searching for what is the heart of it. Where is the most important part of the rifle? Which piece and component has the potential to cause the biggest issues? What's the heart of accuracy? And this podcast here for the next several episodes is going to break it down piece by piece in every part and piece, including, we're going to talk about stocks and triggers and bedding and pillars and materials that they use. We're going to talk about optics and where they're manufactured, what they're made out of. We're going to talk about rings and bases and why we choose what we choose, things you got to be careful of, things you have to purchase properly if you want. You are vulnerable in every single one of these areas to take what could have been a good shooting rifle and making it a poor shooting rifle. But there are a couple keys to going from good to great, and it has nothing to do with custom. It has nothing to do with factory. If you were to ask me the very first or the top most important priority when it comes to a world-class rifle, it is the first part the bullet touches once the gun's fired. That is the throat or the lead going into the barrel. Everything else falls apart if that's not right. Everything else doesn't matter. That bullet, your rifle, is nothing but a tool to get the bullet started in a direction that you want it to go in consistently. The entire rifle in itself is a tool, a working sum of parts that have to do certain jobs to get the bullet started into the barrel. But the key or heart of accuracy is, number one, the first thing the bullet touches once it's fired. The rifle itself is just a delivery system to get the bullet started into the barrel. Nothing else. It is nothing else. It has nothing else to do with it. It has to be right, and if it's not right, just like a poorly built house that doesn't have the proper amount of studs holding the walls, or it doesn't have the proper code for different types of materials that were used, you're vulnerable to the whole house collapsing, right? You've built a house of cards, and the rifle is still vulnerable to that. You can take and you can just build a house of cards by all of these parts and pieces being wrong, but that's after the fact. This is the heart. Everything else is either going to allow it to continue to shoot well or introduce negative effects that will compound the problem. So that bullet launched properly will fly straight and true every single time if nothing else touched it. If the bullet was just magically launched into the air and didn't have to worry about the transition from the throat to the barrel and it would just launch, all of these other things would fall apart. Where this is important is we can't do it that way. So the very first, and in my mind, the key to ultimate accuracy, or what I like to say, giving the rifle the ability to shoot to 100% of its full potential. Now, let me explain that a little bit better. A rifle barrel just has a potential, right? And so we've got the throat as number one. That has and can have the biggest detrimental effect to the accuracy. That is the first thing the bullet touches when it leaves the brass. When you fire and when the firing pin falls and detonates that primer, the charge is sent, the bullet is launched out of the case mouth. Once it hits that throat, that's where it starts. It either is going to continue well from there or it's not. That is the heart, the start, the baseline, the foundation of it all. Don't do that right, and you negatively affect the possible accuracy in a percentage, and then it continues from there. So we've got the throat. Get it wrong, you can have a perfectly built rifle in every other way and still have an absolute terrible rifle. The next is the barrel, and the lands and grooves, the quality, and allowing that bullet to transition through the barrel without massive deformation, without ripping and tearing jackets, without making it oblong like a football, thinking about, if you throw a spiral, if your lands and grooves are cut crooked, your bullet is slamming into and sticking at an angle, and it will swage itself in there. This has been proven that if you get a bullet to start in the lands and grooves at a little bit of an angle, once it starts, it will stay that way. When it goes out the other end, it will restabilize itself. But in some ways, you've either deformed the bullet, you've hurt the bullet in flight, you've changed everything about the process as soon as that happens. So throat, that is the key, the heart of it all. The next part is the barrel. The barrel itself is the make or break as far as what the rifle has the potential to live up to. And I think a lot of people fall asleep at the wheel on this one too. Even barrel makers that look, it's just a tube. Well, it can have a ton of issues, but the throat done properly allows the barrel to shoot to 100% of its full potential. So the throat comes first, the barrel comes second. If you have a great barrel that has the potential to shoot quarter MOA and you cut a crooked throat in it, the only thing you've done is reduce the quality of your accuracy by starting the bullet into the barrel wrong. And so think about it, rather than it reaching 100% of its true potential, it only reaches 90% or 85% or 80% or 50%. So throat first, barrel quality. Barrel quality is huge here because the only thing that happens from here is either it's going to live up to its 100% of its potential or it's going to be degraded by the throat, the crown, or the rest of the parts and pieces involved. So the very second thing, priority-wise, is what is the potential accuracy of the barrel itself? You're vulnerable to this in your selection. So we're real careful on who we check and who we use, and there's lots of reasons why. And we're actually going to go into detail with this and share with you, some of the things that have to do with this part. But again, the throat is the key, but you can't rule out the potential accuracy of the barrel. As if you have a poor barrel and cut a perfect throat, the barrel can, let's just say you only have a barrel that can potentially shoot, 3/4 of a minute. That's the quality of the barrel that you have. If you cut a perfectly straight throat, you're going to have 3/4 of a minute accuracy. So the perfectly straight throat is in conjunction with the perfect barrel, or as a high quality accurate barrel as you can get. The perfectly straight throat allows it to shoot to 100% of its accuracy, so the barrel is second. So selecting your barrel quality, how it's made, the materials it's made out of, the processes it goes through, how it's hand lapped, how it's heat treated, how the material is used, abused, and in essence then sent to you or to your smith, and then them at that point now, that rifle holds a potential accuracy, but here's where the throat is first, barrel second. So your selection of the parts you're going to start with have an effect, and the barrel is the first part that's vulnerable, and the key to that accuracy is the throat being cut into it. I hope it makes sense on the podcast here. We'll dive more into that in the next podcast because we're going to start from the least important to the most important. We're going to work backwards here. So then we've got the barrel and its potential accuracy. From there, we have the receiver. What's feeding and functioning? How is it locking up on its slugs? So this is sort of the engine. Think about your rifle cartridge itself is the fuel. I consider the action itself like the engine, and then the cartridge itself sort of like the fuel that gets it going. But enough can't be said about it. You're absolutely vulnerable to a poor quality action. And there are things that I've learned over the years that make a great action or actually deteriorate, again, potential reduction in the quality or the accuracy of the rifle. There are things that you can do to hurt what the rifle barrel can live up to its potential to. So let's just say we're working backwards. So we've got a barrel that's able to shoot a half a minute. That's fair enough. We got a perfectly straight throat in it, which means now the barrel is going to shoot to its full potential, 100%. So it can shoot the half a minute it was made to. That's the quality of the barrel. We didn't degrade that by starting the throat or starting the bullet into it, allowing the bullet to run through the barrel without deforming it, without changing the BC, without tearing jackets, and all the other things that happen when it ends crooked or poor quality barrel. We have a crown that's cut on it. That's part of the barrel. Again, when you're making that perfectly straight throat, and then you go back and you cut a perfectly straight and square crown, no burrs. Again, you're just letting the barrel shoot to its full potential. But then from there we go to the action. And I just want to take a couple minutes and talk about this because the action here, again, you've got a rifle barrel that has a potential of shooting up to, let's just say, a half MOA with a great quality action with things inside that you can't see, measure, or feel. The action's going to let the barrel sing. It's going to let it do its job. It's the engine that drives everything. And there are things inside that matter. The problem with most consumers is all actions look the same from the outside. They're usually black, they're coated, Cerakoted, they're ion bonded, they're sulfate nitrided, whatever. But most consumers, when they look at a receiver, it's like they're looking at the outside of a car and they can't get in and take it for a ride. They can't get inside and sit behind the steering wheel and see what's all going on in the internals and the quality of the work under the hood and the motor. And all these things matter. To the consumer, though, they always base this on price. They assume that it doesn't matter, that they all look the same, they all should shoot about the same, and it really can't be anything further from the truth, right? There's a lot of good actions out there that shoot well. There are a lot of actions out there that don't shoot so well, that have potentials for higher issues, and then you've got a few actions that are just absolutely top of the line, consistent, right? From there, we go to the stock, and when you get to the stock, this cannot be overstated enough that this is where the rubber meets the road, right? This is the traction. This is what allows you to dig in and get the car rolling really fast, right? And without good quality tires in a car, regardless of the quality of the sports car itself, if you're racing it, you're going to slide out of the turn and kill yourself. You're going to be completely out of control on the racetrack. It's raining out and you go around and turn and just slide off the road. It's just got snow in the road and you're sitting there, you're that person that's spinning away, right? Don't spin your wheels on this, because I will tell you that we don't do barreled actions here because the stocks are still an issue. Even though we use all super high quality stocks, they are vulnerable. They are human made parts, and again, they can have some issues. Now, they can be corrected so that they'll do their job, and that's getting traction for the rifle, right? But we intervene with it. We get them here. We make a decision if we want to bet it, which I'm going to tell you that I recommend betting for all rifles, period. If you want a quarter-minute gun and you have a quarter-minute gun, you have to get that mirrored connection between the stock and the actual action to get it to run to its full potential and eliminate the potential small issues that happen when they don't lock in properly, right? So the stock material, the pillars, the materials on molded stocks that they use for the fillers, the machining techniques on how they clamp the aluminum on chassis before they machine it. Are they putting stress in it? Are they clamping it tight, and then after they do the machining, they release the clamps and it springs back? Are they putting tension in it when they machine it? So think about like this 3-foot long bar of aluminum, and somebody clamps it down too tight, and they sort of bend it a little bit. Almost they're measurable, but just enough on the ends. They've got it cranked pretty hard. Well, they do all of this world-class machining, and they let those clamps go. Everything bends back, and you've got a warped underneath where the action sets. And that can cause issues, right? And then just the mating surfaces, how much material is touching the action. I'm often amazed, I look at a lot of these chassis now, I am stunned at how little material is actually touching the receiver itself. I mean, I swear it's like you've got twice the size of a number 2 pencil tip running the length of both sides of the receiver, and you've got the back of the recoil lug. And to me, that's shocking, like just what little area is touching. Because you're not locking it in. These things flex and move like crazy when you shoot, and it'll just play out on the line. Your zeros will change. You'll have this inconsistency. You'll have the occasional flyer. You take the stock in and out. You take the barreled action in and out of the stock, and you have things moving around. So I'm going to break this podcast down piece by piece over the next several podcasts and talk about each of these and the pros and cons. So let's talk about the stock. I'm not get caught up on that one too much here. But as you can tell, I'm sort of passionate about this one because every part's human made, and nobody makes anything perfect, right? We strive to. Our goal is always perfection, but we're still humans. And so we're trying to make this perfect rifle out of really what is imperfect parts. And so we're thinking about the critical elements that are just detrimental. Think of it as that's what's just going to make the rifle just completely fall apart, or leave you exposed to just having those bad experiences like I used to have with factory rifles. And when I was younger, which led me into, really building and designing our own, because I would take all of these things that I found and I would fix them. I would say, okay, we're going to address this. We have to fix this. I know McMillan asked us to pull one of our podcasts because we recommend under the receiver and forward of the recoil lug that they use the Weatherby fill, which is meant for magnums, but we even use it for all of ours. And they had asked if we would remove that because they had so many customers calling and asking for it, and they really would rather not do that. It's a different fill. It's harder. All of these other things, and they do it. They're not begrudging, and I love the people there. They're awesome. but it's not something standard. It's something that we do, period. When you get from there, now we're talking about accessories on the stock itself, but now we're going to get into the trigger. And we talked about trigger hangers here at the class last week. I love the long-range shooting schools because they reignite with questions, although we've been answered them or we've dealt with these issues over the past and made decisions. A lot of times it's a new exposure to a new customer, and they'll ask the questions like, wow, why do you do this or why do you do that? And it's like, well, actually, there's a real story behind that. And triggers are a big deal as well. And we'll talk about the triggers, and we're going backwards from priority number 1, working down through the rifle. But when we address this in the upcoming podcast, we're going to start at the bottom and work our way to the most important part of it. Once we get past the trigger, now we're on to, and we're just talking about the core of the rifle. We're not talking about bipods and all the other accessories. But once we get past the trigger, then we've got to talk about coatings. Then we've got to talk about the rings and bases. And there, again, you are vulnerable. All of these pieces can have an absolute deteriorating effect on the overall quality of the rifle and can take that beautiful shooting rifle and start kicking it down a notch. So if everything's perfect, the rifle will shoot to, or the barrel will shoot to 100% of its potential accuracy. It is sort of, that's our goal, right? And as we start going down through this list, all of these things that are off a little bit just start making, it's like a checkbook, -2% for this, -3 for that, -2 for this, -4 for that. And by the time you're said and done, you wind up with a -20 or -30 off of your 100%. And now you've got a rifle that's only shooting at 70% of its potential. And that's sort of the way that we approached it. And that's sort of how we picked every single part, every single piece, and how we control and try to maintain that super high level through the rest of the system, because it's still vulnerable. You can do a great job at all of this stuff and still wind up with a poor shooting rifle. So rings and bases, we'll talk about that. And then the scopes. Oh my gosh, we talk about them so much here at the school. And the biggest thing we always get the justification for is, number one, dealers are incentivized to sell highly profitable scopes. Usually they're imports with bigger markups in a way to incentivize people to sell the scopes. And the scopes, again, that's where the rubber meets the road with these optics on the other side. Like, you don't have a scope it's like a micrometer. It's like a ruler. You are extremely vulnerable to it not tracking properly, it not coming back to a perfect zero. Just all of these things happen. So the last part on our list here, that's the finishing product, like this is the icing on the cake, is the scope. You got to make sure you use quality here. You've got to be very diligent. You got to be careful in the marketing, and we'll talk about all that in the upcoming podcast. And when we get into the barrels and such, we're going to talk to a couple barrel makers. And I would like to bring Oler on. Oler seems to think that barrels have a potential to change to BCs, and that one of their Oler 89 systems actually will give you the correct BC for your barrel. So every rifle that shoots, let's just say an 88 grain ELD match, let's just say the BC on books is 545.545 G1. Oler is saying that barrels have a detrimental effect to that, and a lot of it is the potential of the throat and deforming the bullet when it hits the rifling. So we're going to cover some of that, and then we'll talk about, of course, some coatings and things you can do to the bullets. But so when we start this next series, I'm going to start with rifle scopes. That's going to be our very next podcast, and we're going to talk about things to take into consideration. We're going to talk about what we look for, why we made the choices that we have. And it's all in trying to protect the rifle. It has nothing to do with brand loyalty. It has nothing to do with, well, here's what we think you should build, or here's our favorite car brand. I'm a Dodge guy, you're a Chevy guy, however that works. It has nothing to do with that. It's sort of funny that we would drop any of our scope makers instantly if we found out that they were foregoing any of the crucial points in an optic that allow us to shoot the way that we do. So stay tuned for the next podcast. We're gonna start this whole series. So this is part 1. Next week's series is going to be part 2, in which we're going to start from priority on the bottom of the list right to the most important thing. And next week's going to be part 2. Before we continue on to the podcast, I do want to say a quick thank you to Krieger Barrels. Of course, Krieger Barrels is a maker of fine cut rifle barrels. We use them in a lot of our custom rifles here, and they have a new product called Krieger Direct, where you can log on, purchase an in-stock barrel and have it delivered within 3 to 5 business days, which we think is phenomenal. So if you're interested in a custom barrel and you would like a good quality one and you need it now, you can stop over to KriegerDirect.com. That's KriegerDirect.com. All right, so we won't make this podcast too long. Just a couple of little highlight points we'd like to throw out there before we continue on. We'd like to invite you to stop over to our YouTube channel. We are putting up a lot more reviews on let's just say we just did the XLR NV Pro, and we built a prototype. It's up on our website now. You can see it there. But we've been using it at the shooting school here for a couple of weeks, and we have a really good selection. So we have the MDT, we have an XLR, we have a Masterpiece Arms, we have a Foundation. We try to keep a good selection of stocks here because people do shoot different stocks better. They'll find themselves more comfortable in one than the other. And so we just have a really good representation of all the different tactical stocks that are out there here at the school. So you can stop over to our YouTube page and see some of the products that we're working on there. And we're going to start doing a lot of reviews, and we're really excited too is we're going to start doing a lot of reviews at the range. So that'll start here in a couple weeks as well, as soon as our last shooting school for May finishes up here next week. We do have a couple slots left for the shooting school at the end of the year, so we have just a few slots left. If you'd like to join us, we'd love to have you. I think we're down to like 2 slots for the year. Thank you for everyone who had signed up. We really appreciate it. We're certainly looking forward to serving you here and having you attend our class. Then the other thing we did post up our moving target school. We pulled it off for a day or two. We wanted to make sure that we had all the pricing right. We are going to include lunch both days. So we're going to have like hot dogs and hamburgers on the first day of the class, which is Saturday. Second day of the class, we're going to have Eric do some pulled pork, which he does a great job with. So if you'd like to really learn the art of shooting a mover, we're going to be holding that class November 12 and 13. And that's going to be in Swainsboro, Georgia. We're going to have a sight-in on Friday to chronograph rifles, get some dope, everything like that. Should be a great time, limited to 16 shooters. We'll have 8 on the line at a time. We'll be rotating you through the pits. You can stop over to our YouTube channel or our website. You can see some of the videos and sort of how we run the class. I think it really is the best way to learn to shoot movers. And then also just really quick here, we do have our online long-range shooting school going full bore. We just posted up a new video yesterday on breathing. Always appreciate everybody who would like to do that. And the reason for the online long-range shooting school is simply for those that can't come to the school, those that just can't afford to get here or did the travel, all that thing. We think it's going to be really awesome here in about the next year or two that we'll have our entire online long-range shooting school accessible online, where you can really just go learn and enjoy the art of long-range shooting, from the convenience and comfort of your own home. But that said, though, we have a discount price on our website. I think our introductory price is $29.95, and you can start into the process, and it'll take us through the end of the year until we have what we think is going to be an estimate of about 180 videos or so. And then we'll start into season 2 next year with some advanced stuff as well. So it'll keep going as we keep moving along. So you can sign up on Patreon. You can look for Jamie Dotson's Extraordinary Guide to Accuracy, or you can stop over to wolfprecision.net and look for our online long-range shooting school. Also, if you'd enjoyed the podcast, we'd like to ask if you would share it. And also, if you'd leave us a great review, we'd always really appreciate that. It helps us a lot with our standings. If you would like to support the show, you can stop over to our website. It's wolfprecision.net. Click on the podcast, and you can become a Patreon member. It's, I think, $4.95 a month. We really appreciate it. All those that support the show is our way of saying thank yous. We're going to be putting up some bonus content from our audio version of our online long-range shooting school. You will have access to that at no additional charge. So you can stop over and enjoy some of the audio content that we're putting up on our online long-range shooting school is our way of saying thank you for supporting the show. We certainly appreciate that as well. So we're really looking forward to this. This is something that I've put a lot of thought into in the process, and I think this is really good content, whether you're building a custom rifle or working with a factory rifle, of just trying to get out there and get the best out of it, because the frustration part really just wears on you, and it was so frustrating. It's what led me into the business I'm in now, and just correcting and fixing, and just led down this long 2-decade search of what is the heart, what's the key, what are things that we can do to make the rifle shoot to its full potential, and then what are red flags, is to say that this rifle certainly is not worth it. Its weight is just not holding up to its end of the bargain. It isn't worth the heartache and process it's going to go in to try to get it to shoot reasonably well. And so at that point, the rifle just gets sold off and gets replaced almost instantly, especially with factory rifles. So looking forward to sharing all this great information with you, hopefully to help you sort of analyze and pick them and choose some of the correct parts, watch for some of these pitfalls, and recognize some of these issues that we're going to talk about to save you that 6 months of heartache of just over and over going to the range, wasting components and wasting time on a rifle that may never shoot, custom or otherwise. So thank you so much. Stay tuned for the next part of the series. Part 2 will be coming out next week. My name is Jamie Dotson. I am your host, and you are listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.